I'm Mason. I'm 25 years old. And the day I finally escaped the suffocating grip of my family was supposed to be the proudest day of my life. Instead, it became a crime scene. Before I tell you how a single piece of paper destroyed my family and how I ended up owning the car my father used to humiliate me, please take a second to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Let me take you back to that morning. The sun was beating down on the university quad. It was 90 degrees in the shade, and wearing a black polyester graduation gown felt like being wrapped in a garbage bag inside a sauna. Sweat was trickling down my spine, soaking my dress shirt, the only nice shirt I owned, which I'd bought from a thrift store specifically for this day. Around me, thousands of families were cheering. Air horns were blasting. People were crying happy tears, hugging their kids, taking selfies. It was a sea of joy, but I sat there, stone-faced, my stomach churning with acid. I gripped the armrests of my folding chair until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't looking at the stage. I was scanning the crowd, searching for them. My parents, Anthony and Linda. I had texted them the time 3 weeks ago. I reminded them yesterday. I sent a pin drop of the location this morning. "We'll be there, Mason. Don't be dramatic," my dad had texted back. But as the names started being called, Aronson, Abbott, Adams, I couldn't see them. "You okay, man?" The guy sitting next to me, a buddy from my architecture studio named Dave, nudged my arm. "You look like you're gonna pass out." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just the heat." "Your folks here?" "They're coming," I said. "Traffic, probably." Dave nodded, but I saw the pity in his eyes. He knew. Everyone who knew me knew the story. The broke student who worked 3 jobs. The guy who fell asleep in the studio because he'd just finished an 8-hour shift at the warehouse. The guy whose parents drove luxury cars but couldn't afford to help him buy textbooks. Mason Miller. The loudspeaker boomed my name. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through wet concrete. I climbed the stairs to the stage. The lights were blinding. Dean Samuel was standing there. He was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a handshake that could crush a walnut. He was an old-school academic, the kind of man who respected grit. He knew my grandfather, Joseph, years ago. That was the only reason I felt a connection to this place. "Congratulations, Mason," Dean Samuel said, his voice low and warm. He handed me the diploma holder. "Summa cum laude. Your grandfather would have been incredibly proud." "Thank you, sir," I choked out. I took the diploma. I turned to the audience. This was the moment, the photo op. I forced a smile, scanning the VIP section where the parents were seated. And then I saw them. They had arrived. And they were making a scene. My father, Anthony, was wearing a cream-colored linen suit that probably cost more than my entire year's tuition. He was wearing sunglasses, looking bored. My mother, Linda, was next to him, fanning herself with a program, looking annoyed that she had to be outside. And behind them were my brother, Carter, and his obnoxious friend, Hunter. Carter was 22, a college dropout, wearing a designer hoodie and looking at his phone. Hunter was holding a camera, a professional vlogging setup, pointed right at the stage. They weren't clapping. Not one of them. Dad was pointing at his watch. Mom was checking her makeup in a compact mirror. I walked down the stairs, the diploma feeling heavy in my hand. I navigated through the crowd of hugging families to get to them. I wanted a hug. I know that sounds pathetic for a 25-year-old man, but I just wanted my dad to clap me on the shoulder and say, "Good job, son." I reached them. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You made it." "Barely," Dad grunted. He didn't take off his sunglasses. "Parking was a nightmare. Why did you choose a school with such terrible infrastructure?" "It's graduation, Anthony," Mom sighed. "Of course it's crowded." She looked me up and down. "Your tie is crooked, Mason. You look disheveled." "Happy graduation to you too, Mom," I said, the sarcasm slipping out. "Yo, congrats on the piece of paper, bro," Carter sneered, not looking up from his phone. "Now you can finally get a real job and stop embarrassing us with that beat-up truck you drive." Hunter laughed. the camera lens zooming in on my face. Say cheese for the vlog, Mason. The broke brother finally graduates. I felt my face burning. Can you put the camera away, Hunter? Let him film, Dad snapped. We need documentation. Documentation, I asked. For what? Family memories? Dad reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a card. He didn't pull out a gift. He pulled out a thick, white envelope. It was sealed with wax like some kind of official summons. For this, Dad said. He shoved the envelope into my chest. I instinctively grabbed it. What is this? Open it, Mom said. Her voice was sharp, eager. She crossed her arms, a smirk playing on her lips. Read it out loud. We want to make sure you understand the terms. I looked around. People were starting to stare. We were standing near the exit of the seating area. Other families were popping champagne bottles. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a stack of papers. At the top was a cover letter written on my father's business stationery. Invoice for services rendered to Mason Joseph Miller from Anthony and Linda Miller. Date May 20th, 2024. My hands started to shake. I flipped to the next page. It was a spreadsheet, an itemized list. Diapers and formula, $19.99 to $2001. $4,500 clothing and shoes, 2001 to 2017. $12,000 food and groceries, estimated at $300 per month for 18 years. $64,800 rent for bedroom, age 18 to 25. Charged retroactively $84,000 electricity and water usage, $5,600 gasoline for rides to school, primary/secondary $3,200 emotional labor and parenting convenience fee, $25,000 total due, $199,100. I stared at the number. The ink seemed to swim before my eyes. Emotional labor fee? Rent for my childhood bedroom? Is this a joke? I whispered. I looked up at my father. Dad, is this a prank? Do I look like I'm joking? Anthony lowered his sunglasses. His eyes were cold, hard flint. You think raising you was free? You think we just poured money into you out of the goodness of our hearts so you could walk away? I'm your son, I stammered. You're supposed to raise me. That's what parents do. That's what poor people do. Mom interjected, stepping forward. She poked a manicured finger into my chest. Smart people treat family like a business, an investment. We invested in you, Mason, for 25 years. And now the contract is up. It's time for the ROI. Return on investment. You want me to pay you $200,000? My voice rose an octave. I just graduated. I have student loans. I have negative money. That's not our problem, Carter laughed. Maybe you should have thought about that before you moved out and stopped doing Dad's yard work for free. We know you have a job lined up, Dad said smoothly. Architecture firm downtown. Starting salary is decent. We expect 40% of your gross income every month until the debt is settled. Plus interest. We set the rate at 8%. 8%, I shouted. That's illegal. You can't charge your child interest for being born. Watch your tone, Dad hissed. He stepped closer, looming over me. Or I'll add a disrespect fee. Look, Mason, here's the reality. You sign this acknowledgement of debt today, right now, or you are no longer part of this family. We disown you. We cut you off. You lose the name, you lose the connections, you lose everything. I never had anything, I yelled back. You never gave me anything. I paid for my own college. I paid for my own car. I bought my own clothes since I was 16. And who put a roof over your head so you could sleep at night? Mom screeched. Who fed you? Give me that. She lunged forward and grabbed the diploma case from my other hand. Hey! I pulled back. That's mine. Not until you pay up. Mom snarled, gripping the leather case. This is collateral. You don't get to be a big-shot architect with our name unless you pay the entrance fee. We were wrestling over my diploma in the middle of the graduation quad. Hunter was circling us, the camera getting every angle. World star, Hunter shouted, laughing. Family drama. This is gold. Let go, Mom. Pleaded. You're embarrassing yourself. You're the embarrassment, Dad yelled. Sign the paper, Mason. Sign it. I felt tears stinging my eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of pure, unadulterated rage. I looked at these people. These strangers. They were dressed in silk and linen, driving luxury cars, and they were trying to shake down their own son for money they didn't need. I was about to let go. I was about to throw the invoice in their faces and walk away forever. But then the crowd went silent. It was a sudden, heavy silence that rippled outward from where we stood. I looked up. Walking through the parted crowd was Dean Samuel. But he wasn't smiling anymore. He looked furious. And walking beside him was a man in a sharp black suit carrying a leather briefcase. Dean Samuel walked right up to my father. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Anthony. Mr. Miller, the dean said, his voice projecting like he was in a lecture hall. I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Dad straightened his jacket, putting on his charming business smile. Ah, Dean Samuel, just a little family dispute. Teaching the boy some financial responsibility. Nothing to worry about. Oh, I'm worried, the dean said. He nodded to the man beside him. This is Mr. Grayson. He's a forensic accountant and the executor of the Joseph Miller estate. My father's face went pale. The smile vanished. Joseph, Dad whispered. My father. Yes, Mr. Grayson said. He lifted the briefcase. And we have some invoices of our own to discuss. That was the moment I knew. The trap hadn't been set for me. It had been set for them. To understand why my father looked like he'd seen a ghost, and to understand why I was standing there holding a bill for my own childhood, you have to understand the hell I lived in for the last 7 years. Growing up, the mantra in the Miller household was always the same. We are broke. It was a strange kind of broke. We lived in a 5-bedroom house in a gated community. My parents went on business trips to Cabo and the Hamptons 3 times a year. My mother had a closet full of Louis Vuitton bags. My father belonged to a country club that cost $15,000 a year in dues. But whenever I needed anything, braces, a field trip fee, new sneakers, the answer was always, we can't afford it, Mason. Money is tight. The market is down. You need to sacrifice. So I sacrificed. At 16, I got a job at a car wash. I worked weekends and summers. I bought my own clothes at Goodwill. I paid for my own school lunches. When I got my license, Dad told me, if you want to drive, buy a car. I saved up $1,200 and bought a rusted-out 2005 Ford Ranger. It smelled like wet dog and rattled when it went over 40 miles per hour, but I loved it. It was mine. It was freedom. Then came college. I'll never forget the conversation. It was the summer before my freshman year. I had been accepted into the architecture program, my dream. I sat my parents down at the marble kitchen island. Dad, Mom, I said, holding my acceptance letter. Tuition is due next week. I've applied for financial aid, but because your income is so high, I didn't qualify for any grants. I need you to co-sign a loan or help me with the first semester. Dad didn't even look up from his iPad. He was reading stock quotes. Mason, we've discussed this, he said, his voice flat. The business is in a fragile state. We have zero liquidity. We are cash poor. But Dad, I pleaded, you just bought a new boat. It's sitting in the driveway. That's a business expense, he snapped. Client entertainment. You don't understand tax law, Mason. Look, you're 18. You're a man. Figure it out. If you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. We're teaching you grit, Mom added, sipping her wine. Carter is different. He's sensitive. He needs support. You're a survivor. You don't need our help. That was the dagger. Carter is different. Carter, my younger brother, was the golden child. While I was scrubbing hubcaps at the car wash, Carter was getting private tennis lessons. When Carter turned 18, he didn't get a figure-it-out speech. He got a fully furnished apartment near the local community college and a monthly allowance. But I believed them. I truly believed they were struggling behind the scenes. I thought the luxury was a facade they had to maintain for Dad's clients. So I took on the debt. I took out the maximum in student loans. I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner called the Greasy Spoon. I remember one night specifically. It was my junior year. It was 3 a.m. I was scraping burnt eggs off a griddle, my eyes burning from the bleach and grease. I had a final exam in structural engineering at 8 a.m. I hadn't slept in 20 hours. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Carter had posted a story. He was at a nightclub in Miami. He was holding a bottle of Grey Goose vodka with a sparkler in it. The caption read, VIP life. Thanks Mom and Dad for the spring break trip. #blessed. I stared at the screen, grease dripping from my spatula onto my shoe. I called my mom. It was late, but I didn't care. Hello? She answered, sounding groggy. You sent Carter to Miami? I asked, my voice trembling. I asked you for $200 last week for textbooks, and you said you couldn't pay the electric bill. Mason. She sighed. It's 3 a.m. Are you drunk? No, Mom. I'm working. I'm scrubbing a grill while Carter is popping bottles on your dime. Lower your voice, she hissed. Carter is going through a hard time. He's finding himself. He needed a mental health break. The trip was a gift from your father's bonus. It was a one-time thing. You always have money for him, I yelled. Never for me. Stop being jealous, Mason. It's ugly. We do what we can. You're strong. You can handle the work. Carter, he's fragile. If we don't support him, he spirals. Now let me sleep. She hung up. I stood there in the kitchen, the smell of stale bacon fat clinging to my skin, and I cried. I cried for 5 minutes, wiped my face with a rough paper towel, and went back to scraping the grill. Because I needed that $12 an hour. That was my life for 4 years. And then today happened. As I stood there on the graduation lawn, watching my father confront the dean, my eyes drifted past them to the parking lot. They had parked in the reserved for faculty lot. My dad always ignored parking signs. And there it was, a Porsche Panamera. Brand new, jet black. It gleamed in the sunlight like a dark jewel. It still had the temporary dealer plates on it. I knew my dad's car. He drove a BMW. Mom drove a Mercedes SUV. Nice car, isn't it? I turned. Carter had snuck up beside me while Dad was talking to the dean. He was smirking. Whose is it? I asked. Dad's, Carter said, popping a piece of gum. Picked it up last week. It's the Turbo S model. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. He traded in the Beamer. He bought a $180,000 car? I felt like I was going to throw up. He told me last week he couldn't help me with my deposit for my apartment because the market crashed. Carter shrugged. Creative accounting, bro. Dad says money is liquid. Sometimes it flows in, sometimes it flows out. It just never flows to you. He laughed, slapping my back. Don't worry. Once you pay off that $200,000 invoice, maybe he'll let you wash it. The rage I felt earlier solidified into something colder, something harder. They weren't broke. They had never been broke. They were just thieves. They were hoarding resources, spending lavishly on themselves and their golden child, while treating me like a servant they could bill for room and board. I looked back at the group. Dean Samuel was still staring at my father. The dean wasn't intimidated by Anthony's suit or his bluster. Mr. Miller, the dean repeated, I think you should step into my office. We have some legal matters to discuss regarding the Joseph Miller Trust. Legal matters? Dad laughed nervously. I don't know what you're talking about. My father died 4 years ago. His estate is settled. Is it? Mr. Grayson, the lawyer, spoke up. His voice was like grinding stones. Because according to the terms of your father's will, the educational trust fund set up for Mason was to be released to him upon his 18th birthday for the sole purpose of tuition and housing. Dad froze. His eyes darted to Mom. Mom stopped fanning herself. And, Grayson continued, since Mason here has just graduated having paid his own way entirely via loans, we have a question. Grayson took a step closer to my father. Where is the $500,000, Anthony? The number hung in the air. $500,000. I gasped. My knees went weak. I grabbed onto Dave's shoulder to keep from falling. 500,000? I whispered. That's a lie. Mom shouted. She sounded shrill, panicked. There was no trust. Joseph died broke. We have the bank records, Linda, Dean Samuel said. And we have the withdrawal slips, signed by you, as custodians. The crowd around us was dead silent. Hundreds of people, students, parents, professors were watching. Hunter, to his credit, was still filming. He didn't realize he was documenting his own family's destruction. This is harassment, Dad yelled, his face turning red. I'm leaving. Come on, Linda. Carter, let's go. Dad turned to storm off toward his new Porsche. I wouldn't do that, sir, Grayson said calmly. Why not? Dad challenged. Because, Dean Samuel said, pointing toward the parking lot entrance. I've already called the campus police and the state district attorney's office. At the edge of the lot, 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing silently. My father stopped. He looked at the police, then back at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. The sight of the police cars stopped my father in his tracks, but it didn't stop his mouth. Anthony Miller had spent 55 years talking his way out of trouble, and he wasn't about to stop now. This is ridiculous, Dad shouted, turning back to face the dean and the growing crowd. He spread his arms wide, playing to the audience. My son is a liar. He's manipulated you. He's always been a manipulator. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Look at him, Dad bellowed. Standing there looking innocent. We gave him everything. We put a roof over his head. We fed him. And how does he repay us? By sicking the university administration on us with lies about some imaginary trust fund. It's not imaginary, Anthony, Mr. Grayson said, opening his briefcase on a nearby folding table. He pulled out a thick binder. It is a registered legal entity. The Mason Joseph Miller Educational Trust. Fake! Mom screamed. She threw her hands up. Joseph was senile. He didn't know what he was doing. Mom, stop, I said, stepping forward. My voice was quiet, but it carried. Grandpa wasn't senile. He was the only one who ever cared about me. He hated us. Mom spat at me. He always favored you. He tried to cut us out. So you stole my money? I asked. The question felt heavy in my mouth. We didn't steal anything, Dad roared. It was family money. It belongs to the head of the household to distribute as he sees fit. I am the patriarch. I decide who gets what. Dad marched over to me, getting right in my face. I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the sour scent of fear sweat. You listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. He hissed, low enough so the police couldn't hear but loud enough for the front row. You drop this. You tell them you made a mistake. You tell them we paid for your school in cash. You do it right now or I will ruin you. I know partners at every architecture firm in this state. I will make sure you never draw a straight line in this town again. Are you threatening me? I looked him in the eye. For the first time, I didn't look down. I was taller than him. I hadn't realized that until now. I'm promising you, he snarled. I have the invoice. You signed the acknowledgement when you were 18. I never signed anything. You did. Mom interjected. She was digging through her purse. She pulled out the contract she had tried to force on me earlier. The clause. The hidden clause in the car insurance paperwork. When we let you drive the Ford Ranger, you signed a waiver. Page 14, paragraph 3. In the event of financial liquidity, the child agrees to reimburse parents for all accrued living expenses. She held up a piece of paper. It looked legitimate. It had my signature on it, a shaky 16-year-old signature. You tricked me? I stared at the paper. I thought I was signing for liability insurance. It's a contract. Mom screamed triumphantly. She turned to the crowd, waving the paper like a flag. See? He owes us. He owes us $200,000. We have a lien on his future earnings. It's legal. We have a lawyer who drafted this. Yeah. Carter chimed in from the sidelines. Pay up, Mason. Stop trying to rob Mom and Dad. Hunter was loving this. He was circling us, getting close-ups of the document, close-ups of Mom's angry face, close-ups of my shock. Chat is going wild. Hunter whispered to Carter. We have 10,000 viewers right now. They say your brother is a deadbeat scammer. I felt the walls closing in. The humiliation was physical. Felt like heat rash spreading across my chest. My parents were twisting reality in real time. They were gaslighting me in front of hundreds of people. They had a contract. They had the invoice. They had the loud, confident anger of people who believe their own lies. For a second, I doubted myself. Did I owe them? Was I ungrateful? They did feed me. They did house me. Maybe the trust fund was a misunderstanding. But then, Dean Samuel spoke. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just laughed. It was a dry, humorless laugh. Linda, Anthony, the dean said, shaking his head. You really are amateurs. He signaled to Mr. Grayson. Mr. Grayson, please read Exhibit A from the trust withdrawal records. Grayson adjusted his glasses. He picked up a sheet of paper. Date: September 12, 2018. Grayson read. Withdrawal amount: $48,000. Purpose noted on withdrawal slip: tuition payment for Mason Miller freshman year. I blinked. But I took out loans for freshman year. I have the Sally Mae paperwork. Exactly, the dean said. They withdrew the money claiming it was for you, and kept it. Date: January 10, 2019. Grayson continued. Withdrawal: $52,000. Purpose: housing and meal plan for Mason Miller. I lived in a dorm basement and ate ramen. I shouted. Date: June 15, 2020. Grayson read. Withdrawal: $80,000. Purpose: study abroad program for Mason Miller. I never went abroad. I looked at my dad. I worked at the car wash that entire summer. You saw me. You brought your BMW in for me to detail it for free. The crowd gasped. The murmur turned into an angry buzz. The tide was turning. And finally, Grayson said, pulling out a specific bank transfer record. Date: April 15, 2024. Last month. Withdrawal of remaining balance and accrued interest: $152,000. Destination account: Prestige Porsche of Beverly Hills. Dean Samuel pointed a long finger at the black Panamera in the parking lot. That car isn't yours, Anthony, the dean said. It belongs to Mason. He paid for it. Every single bolt. My dad stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. The contract in Mom's hand suddenly looked very flimsy. That's circumstantial, Dad stammered. Money is fungible. We reimbursed ourselves for previous expenses. There is no reimbursement clause in a trust, Grayson said sharply. This is embezzlement. Pure and simple. It is a federal crime. And since you crossed state lines to buy the car, the FBI might be interested. FBI. Mom squeaked. She dropped the paper. Mason. Dean Samuel turned to me. His face softened. Your grandfather, Joseph, came to me 5 years ago. He knew your parents. He knew they were spenders. He set up this trust with strict oversight. But he made me the secondary executor. He told me, Samuel, don't tell the boy until he graduates. Let him learn the value of work. But if Anthony touches a dime of that money for himself, burn him to the ground. The dean smiled, a terrifying, wolf-like smile. I've been tracking their withdrawals for 4 years, Mason. I let them dig the hole. I wanted the amount to be grand theft. I wanted it to be enough to put them away for a long time. He looked at my parents. And today, when you handed Mason that invoice, you sealed your fate. That invoice is proof of your intent to defraud. You admitted you spent your money on him, while secretly spending his money on yourselves. Hunter's camera was lowered. Carter looked like he was about to cry. But what about me? Carter whined. Dad? You said you were gonna buy me a condo next month. With the investment money. Shut up, Carter. Dad snapped. The investment money? I looked at Carter. That was my money too, wasn't it? Probably, Grayson noted. We're auditing the accounts now. The police officers were walking over. They weren't rushing. They knew nobody was going anywhere. Anthony Miller? Linda Miller, the first officer asked. We haven't done anything wrong. Mom shrieked. She pointed at me. He's the thief. He stole our love. He stole our years. She was unraveling. The mask of the sophisticated socialite was gone. She looked like a cornered animal. I need you to step away from the graduate, the officer said firmly. Dad looked at me one last time. His eyes weren't filled with regret. They were filled with hate. You did this, he spat. You ruined this family. I looked at the invoice still crumpled in my hand. Then I looked at the diploma. Then I looked at the Porsche. No, Dad, I said. I didn't ruin the family. I just audited it. The police moved in to separate my parents from me, creating a physical barrier of blue uniforms between us. The crowd, which had been silent, suddenly erupted into whispers and camera shutters. Dean Samuel placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy, grounding weight. Are you all right, son? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. My adrenaline was crashing. I felt lightheaded. Is this real? Is there really $500,000? There was, Grayson corrected gently. They spent most of it. But we will get it back. We have already filed liens against their house, their business accounts, and yes, the cars. My house, Carter yelled. He pushed past Hunter. You can't take the house. I live there. My studio is there. You might want to start looking for a roommate, young man, Dean Samuel said dryly. And a job. This is insane. Carter turned to me, his face twisted in a tantrum. Mason, tell them to stop. You can't let them arrest Mom and Dad. We're family. Family? I laughed. It was a broken sound. 5 minutes ago, you were laughing while Dad tried to extort $200,000 from me. You were filming it for your vlog. That was just content, Carter pleaded. It's a prank, bro. It's just for views. We weren't really gonna make you pay. Your father's invoice seemed very serious, Grayson said. And the threat to disown him seemed quite sincere. Mason, please, Mom wailed. She was actually crying now, real tears, messing up her mascara. Don't let them take us. Who will run the business? Who will take care of Carter? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had charged me rent for my childhood bedroom. The woman who had watched me work double shifts while she got manicures. I don't know, Mom, I said softly. Figure it out. Be a survivor. Isn't that what you taught me? The officers began to escort them away. Not in handcuffs yet. They were being taken to the station for questioning regarding the fraud, but the humiliation was total. They were being marched past the entire university, past the parents of my classmates, past the faculty. Dad tried to maintain his dignity. He adjusted his suit jacket, keeping his head high, but he tripped over a cable on the grass. He stumbled, almost falling. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. He looked back at me with pure venom. As they were loaded into the back of the police cruisers, I stood alone in the center of the quad. The dean turned to the crowd. He raised his hands. All right, everyone, show's over. Let's get back to celebrating our graduates. He signaled the band. The brass section started playing a festive, upbeat tune. It was surreal. 1 minute, a family was being destroyed. The next, pomp and circumstance was playing. Dean Samuel guided me toward the VIP tent. Come with me, Mason. We need to sign some paperwork. And Mr. Grayson has a letter for you. We sat down at a white table under the tent. Mr. Grayson opened his briefcase again. He pulled out a yellowed envelope. It smelled like old paper and pipe tobacco, my grandfather's smell. Joseph wrote this the day he signed the trust, Grayson said. He told me to give it to you when the truth came out. He hoped it never would. He hoped your parents would do the right thing. But he prepared for the worst. I took the envelope. My name, Mason, was written in Grandpa's shaky cursive. I opened it. My dearest Mason, if you are reading this, it means my son Anthony has failed you. It means he chose greed over his own blood. For that, I am profoundly sorry. I know they make you feel small, Mason. I know they make you feel like a burden. But you need to know the truth. You were the only reason I didn't sell the company and give the money to charity years ago. I saw the fire in you. I saw how you fixed your toys instead of asking for new ones. I saw how you protected your little brother even when he was cruel to you. I have set aside this money not to make you rich, but to give you freedom. Freedom from them. Freedom from their debts, their lies, and their expectations. Do not let their failure define your success. You built yourself brick by brick. No one can invoice you for a foundation you laid yourself. Build something beautiful, Mason. Love, Grandpa Joe. I put the letter down. I put my head in my hands and I wept. I sobbed like a child. Dean Samuel sat silently, pushing a box of tissues toward me. He didn't tell me to man up. He just let me cry. After a few minutes, I wiped my face. So, I said, my voice hoarse, what happens now? Now, Grayson said, clicking his pen. We execute the scorched earth protocol your grandfather authorized. Scorched earth. We recover the assets, Grayson explained. We have forensic accountants going through your father's business books as we speak. We believe he used the trust fund to prop up his failing consultancy firm. That pierces the corporate veil. We can seize everything. The house, the business assets, the boats. And the Porsche? I asked. Grayson smiled. Technically, since it was purchased directly with stolen trust funds, it is considered proceeds of crime. However, since the trust is yours, once we clear the title, the car is effectively yours. I don't want it, I said immediately. I don't want anything they touched. Sell it then, Dean Samuel suggested. Use the money to start your own firm. Or pay off those student loans you shouldn't have had to take out. Wait, I realized something. My student loans. I have $80,000 in debt. We will sue your parents' estate for that amount plus damages, Grayson said. You will be made whole, Mason. It might take a year, but you will be debt-free. As we talked, I saw Carter lingering outside the tent. Hunter had abandoned him, probably running off to edit the viral video. Carter looked small. He looked like a lost kid in a designer hoodie. He caught my eye. He didn't sneer. He didn't shout. He just looked hungry. I looked away. Mr. Grayson, I said, where do I sign? The legal process that followed my graduation wasn't a sprint. It was a marathon of discovery. And every file we opened was another skeleton falling out of my parents' closet. 2 days after graduation, I was sitting in Mr. Grayson's office. It was a high-rise downtown with a view of the city I now realized I barely knew. You need to see this, Grayson said. He spun his laptop around. It was a live stream recording. Hunter's video. It had 3.5 million views. The title was, Rich Parents Try to Extort Graduate Son. Instant Karma. The internet is on your side, Grayson said. Usually, I tell clients to avoid social media during litigation, but in this case, the public outrage is actually helping us freeze their assets faster. No judge wants to be seen going easy on the invoice parents. I scrolled through the comments. User 123. Charging for emotional labor? That mom is a monster. Student. I know this guy. Mason. He's the hardest worker in our studio. His parents are trash. Porsche guy. I hope he keeps the car. That's the ultimate trophy. It's viral, I muttered. They're famous. Infamous, Grayson corrected. And it's destroying Anthony's business. 3 major clients dropped him this morning. He's finished, Mason. Good, I said, and I meant it. But here is the real reveal, Grayson said. He placed a new document on the desk. We got access to the safe deposit box this morning. Court order. What was in it? Your birth certificate. your passport, and this. He slid a photo across the desk. It was a picture of me as a baby. I was being held by my grandfather, Joseph. But standing next to him wasn't my father. It was a woman I didn't recognize. She looked kind. She had my eyes. Who is she? I asked. We don't know yet, Grayson said. But we found a recurring payment in your father's old ledgers. $2,000 a month. Going to a M. Reynolds in Ohio. The payment stopped when you were 4 years old. You think? I think Anthony and Linda might not be just thieves, Grayson said carefully. I think there are more secrets here. But let's focus on the money first. Just then, the receptionist buzzed in. Mr. Grayson? Mr. Miller's brother is here. He says it's an emergency. I sighed. Send him in. Carter walked in. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same clothes as graduation. His hair was messy. Mason, he said, rushing toward me. You gotta help me, man. Dad's accounts are frozen. Mom's cards are declined. The power company came to shut off the lights at the house today. And? I asked, leaning back in the leather chair. And? I have nowhere to go. My landlord kicked me out because the rent check bounced. Dad set up autopay from the stolen account. Didn't he? Probably, I said. Can I stay with you? Carter asked. Just for a few weeks? Until this blows over. I looked at my brother. The boy who had mocked my Ford Ranger. The boy who had gone to Miami while I scrubbed grills. No, I said. Carter blinked. What? No, I repeated. You're an adult, Carter. You're 22. Get a job. I can't get a job, he whined. I have anxiety. I can't work a normal job. Then get an abnormal job, I said. Sell your designer clothes. Sell your watch. Figure it out. You're heartless, Carter screamed. Mom was right. You're cold. I'm not cold, Carter. I stood up. I'm broke. Remember? I have $200,000 in invoices to pay. I picked up the photo of the mystery woman. Now get out. I have a meeting with a lawyer. Carter stormed out, slamming the door. Grayson looked at me with approval. That was hard. Yeah, I said, feeling a weight lift off my chest. But necessary. Now, Grayson said. About the Porsche. The police have released it. It's in the impound lot. It's legally titled to your father. But since we have a constructive trust claim, we can take possession. Do you want to pick it up? I thought about it. The car my father bought with my tuition. The symbol of his greed. Yes, I said. I want to pick it up. And I know exactly where I'm going to drive it. The impound lot was a dusty, miserable place on the edge of town, surrounded by chain-link fences and barbed wire. It was the last place you'd expect to see a $180,000 super sedan. But there it was. The black Porsche Panamera Turbo S. It was covered in a thin layer of dust, but it still looked aggressive. Predatory. The attendant tossed me the keys. You the son? Yeah, I said. Hell of a story on the news, he grunted. Your old man is a piece of work. Enjoy the ride. I unlocked the car. The interior smelled like new leather and my father's cologne. I adjusted the seat. He was shorter than me, I realized again. I wiped the steering wheel with a sanitizer wipe I found in my pocket, trying to scrub away his ghost. I pushed the start button. The V8 engine roared to life with a deep, guttural growl. I pulled out of the lot. The power was intoxicating. I barely touched the gas and the car surged forward. This was what $152,000 of stolen education felt like. Felt smooth. Felt fast. I drove straight to my parents' house. Or what used to be their house. When I pulled into the driveway of the McMansion in the gated community, there was a "for sale/foreclosure" sign on the lawn. The grass was already getting long. I parked the Porsche right in the center of the driveway. I walked up to the front door. I still had my key. I opened the door. The house was dark. The power really had been cut. Hello, I called out. Mason. My mother's voice came from the living room. I walked in. Anthony and Linda were sitting on the expensive white sofa in the dim light. They were drinking warm wine by candlelight. They looked defeated. "You came to gloat?" Dad asked. His voice was raspy. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. "I came to return something," I said. I tossed the Porsche keys onto the coffee table. "The car." Dad looked at the keys hungrily. "No," I said. "I'm selling the car. Grayson is handling it. The proceeds go to paying off my student loans. Those keys are for the tow truck that's coming in 10 minutes. Dad slumped back. "Then why are you here?" Mom asked. She sounded small. "I came for the rest of my things," I said. "My baseball cards. My old sketches. The things you didn't itemize on the invoice." "They're in the garage," Dad muttered. "Take them. Take it all." I went to the garage. I found a box of my old stuff. Dusty, neglected, just like me. As I walked back through the living room, carrying my box, I stopped. "Grayson found the photo," I said, "of the woman, M. Reynolds." The air left the room. Mom looked at Dad. Dad closed his eyes. "Who is she?" I asked. "She was a surrogate," Dad whispered. "We couldn't have kids. Linda had issues. We paid Mary Reynolds to carry you." "A surrogate?" I asked. "Or my mother?" "She was just a vessel." Mom snapped, her old venom returning for a second. "We paid her, just like we paid for everything. You were a transaction, Mason, from the very beginning." "Is that why you hated me?" I asked. "Because I was a transaction that talked back? Because I wasn't the perfect product you ordered?" "We didn't hate you," Dad said, his voice cracking. We resented you. You were expensive. The surrogacy cost a fortune. Then the business tanked. Then Joseph set up that trust but locked us out of it. It felt like you were the reason we were always scrambling. So you made me pay for it," I said. "Literally. We raised you," Mom cried. "Doesn't that count for anything?" "You invoiced me for the diapers, Mom," I said coldly. "So no, it doesn't count. You were just recouping your investment." I walked to the door. "Mason, wait," Dad called out. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to meet Dean Samuel," I said. "He got me a job interview. A real one. Based on my portfolio, not your connections." "Mason, we have nothing," Dad pleaded. "The lawyers say we're going to jail. Embezzlement. Tax fraud. Please, talk to the dean. Drop the charges. We're your parents." I looked at them one last time. Sitting in the dark, in a house they didn't own, drinking warm wine, begging the son they tried to rob. I pulled the invoice out of my pocket. The one Dad handed me at graduation. I had kept it. "I looked over your bill," I said, "and I found an error." "What?" Dad asked, hopeful. "You forgot to charge for the life lessons," I said. "You taught me exactly what kind of man I don't want to be. That lesson, that was priceless." I ripped the invoice in half, then in half again. I let the pieces flutter down onto their expensive rug. "Goodbye, Anthony. Goodbye, Linda." I walked out the door. The tow truck was just pulling up to take the Porsche away. I got into my rusted, dented 2005 Ford Ranger. I turned the key. It sputtered, coughed, and rattled to life. Smelled like wet dog and hard work. I shifted into gear and drove away, leaving the Porsche, the mansion, and the Millers in my rearview mirror. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the road. I was broke. I was in debt. I had no family. But as the wind hit my face through the open window, I realized something. I was free. It has been exactly 14 months since I drove my rusted Ford Ranger out of that gated community, leaving the wreckage of the Miller family in my rearview mirror. People always ask me in the comments, "Mason, what happened to the money? Did you ever find the mystery woman? Did your parents go to jail?" Well, grab a coffee because the fallout was even more chaotic than the explosion. The first 3 months were a blur of depositions, forensic accounting, and sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment I rented above a bakery. I didn't touch the potential money. I lived on ramen and fear, just like I always had. But Mr. Grayson was a shark. A beautiful, terrifying shark in a three-piece suit. He didn't just sue my parents. He dismantled them. He peeled back their financial life layer by layer like a rotten onion. It turned out the embezzlement of my trust fund wasn't their only crime. There was tax evasion. There was insurance fraud involving a stolen boat that was actually sold in Mexico. There were shell companies set up to hide assets from creditors. Anthony and Linda Miller weren't just bad parents. They were bad criminals. The scorched earth protocol was effective. The court seized everything. The McMansion was foreclosed. The furniture was auctioned. The country club memberships were revoked. And yes, the black Porsche Panamera, the symbol of my stolen education, was sold. I remember the day Grayson handed me the check. We were sitting in his office. He slid a cashier's check across the mahogany desk. It wasn't for $500,000. My parents had burned through too much of it on trips and status symbols. But after the asset liquidation and the sale of the Porsche, the total recovered amount was $312,000. It's not the full amount, Grayson said, adjusting his glasses. But it's enough to clear your student debt and start over. I held that check. It felt lighter than the invoice my father had handed me. Pay off Sally Mae, I said immediately. Kill the loans. Every cent. Already prepared, Grayson nodded. And the rest. Put it away, I said. I don't want to see it. I want to build something with it eventually. But right now, I just want to work. And work I did. Dean Samuel kept his promise. He introduced me to a boutique architecture firm that specialized in sustainable housing, repurposing old structures into affordable living spaces. It wasn't glamorous. We weren't building skyscrapers. We were fixing broken things. It fit me perfectly. But there was one loose thread I couldn't cut. Carter. About 6 months after the graduation disaster, I was inspecting a site downtown. It was lunchtime, and I walked into a sandwich shop to grab a sub. Welcome to Jimmy's. What can I get you? The voice was familiar, but the tone was wrong. It was defeated. I looked up. Standing behind the counter, wearing a green apron and a hairnet, was Carter, my golden child brother. The boy who had laughed at me for scrubbing grills. The influencer who lived for the gram. He froze when he saw me. He tried to duck behind the register, but it was too late. Mason, he whispered. Carter, I said. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. The designer hoodie was gone, replaced by a stained uniform. He had dark circles under his eyes. So, I said, looking at the menu board. Turkey Club. No mayo. He made the sandwich with shaking hands. His co-workers were yelling at him to hurry up. When he rang me up, he wouldn't meet my eyes. That'll be $8.50, he mumbled. I handed him a 20. Keep the change. He looked at the bill. Then he looked at me. His eyes welled up. Mom and Dad are living in a motel, he blurted out. A bad one. Dad's trial is next month. They blame you. They talk about you every day. I figured, I said. And you? I'm living in a basement with 3 roommates, Carter said. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. I had to sell the cameras, the laptop, everything. He paused, then looked at me with a vulnerability I had never seen before. It's hard, Mason, standing on your feet all day, dealing with customers who treat you like trash. It's really hard. I looked at my brother. I could have gloated. I could have reminded him of the years he spent mocking me while I did exactly what he was doing now. But I didn't feel triumph. I just felt relief that he was finally learning the lesson I learned at 16. Yeah, Carter, I said softly. It is hard. But the check you get on Friday, the one you earned with your own hands, it's going to feel better than any allowance Dad ever gave you. I took my sandwich. Good luck, Carter. I walked out. I didn't save him. I didn't offer him a room, because saving him would have been robbing him of the only thing that could actually make him a man. The struggle. But the biggest piece of the puzzle was still missing. Reynolds. Grayson had found an address. It was in a small town in Ohio, 3 states away. One Friday afternoon, I got in my Ford Ranger. still rattled. The AC still didn't work. But I trusted it more than any luxury car. I drove for 6 hours, watching the landscape change from city skyline to rolling farmland. I pulled up to a small, white-clapboard house with a porch swing and a garden full of wildflowers. It was modest, clean, and quiet. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I walked up the path and knocked on the door. A woman opened it. She was older than in the photo Grayson had shown me. Her hair was graying, and there were lines around her eyes. But the eyes, they were my eyes. She stared at me. Her hand flew to her mouth. She didn't ask who I was. She knew. Mason, she breathed. Hi, I said awkwardly. I think you know who I am. Come in, she said, opening the door wide. Please, come in. Her house smelled like cinnamon and old books. It was warm. On the mantelpiece, there wasn't a shrine to a lost child. But there was one small, framed photo tucked in the corner. It was the baby picture of me and Grandpa Joseph. We sat at her kitchen table. She made tea. Her hands were shaking just like mine were. I'm Mary, she said. Mary Reynolds. My father said you were a surrogate. I said. That it was just a transaction. Mary laughed, but it was a sad sound. Is that what Anthony told you? That man never could tell the truth if a lie was available. She took a sip of tea and looked at me intensely. I wasn't a stranger, Mason. I was your mother's college roommate, Linda. We were best friends once. My jaw dropped. You knew her? We were close, Mary explained. Linda wanted a child desperately. It was all she talked about. But she couldn't carry. And Anthony needed an heir. He was obsessed with legacy. I was young, I was broke, and I loved Linda. I offered to help. We used a donor egg and Anthony's. Well, but I carried you. I felt you kick. I sang to you for 9 months. Then why did you give me up? I asked. The hurt I had buried for 25 years rose to the surface. Why did you take the money and leave? I didn't take the money, Mason, Mary said firmly. I took the threats. She stood up and went to a drawer. She pulled out a faded legal document. When you were born, something changed in me. I didn't want to give you up. I wanted to be part of your life. But Anthony flipped a switch. He told me if I didn't sign over full rights and disappear, he would destroy me. He threatened to sue me for breach of contract, to bankrupt my family, to ruin my reputation. He had high-powered lawyers. I was a 22-year-old waitress. She pushed the paper toward me. It was a restraining order against Mary Reynolds, filed by Anthony Miller, dated 3 weeks after my birth. He paid me the settlement we agreed on, Mary said. But he made me sign an NDA. If I ever contacted you, I would owe him triple the amount. I didn't have it. So you left, I said. I left? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. But I didn't stop watching. Your grandfather, Joseph? He knew. He was the only good one in that family. He used to send me updates. That photo on the mantel? Joseph sent it to me. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was rough like a worker's hands. Like mine. I know what happened at your graduation, she said. I saw the news. I was so proud of you for standing up to him. I wanted to call you, but I was scared. I didn't know if you'd hate me. I don't hate you, I said, and I realized it was true. I needed to know I wasn't just an invoice. You were never an invoice to me, Mary said. You were the one thing I got right. We talked for hours. We didn't solve everything. You can't fix 25 years of absence in one afternoon. But when I drove away from that house in Ohio, I didn't feel like an orphan anymore. I felt anchored. I returned to the city with a new clarity. I had a job. I had a brother who was finding his own way. I had a connection to my biology. And I had a name that I was going to redeem. Anthony Miller's trial started 3 months later. I was subpoenaed to testify. I walked into the courtroom. My parents were sitting at the defense table. They looked small. Without their expensive clothes, without the backdrop of their mansion, they were just two bitter, aging people terrified of consequences. When I took the stand, the defense attorney, a public defender because they couldn't afford a private one anymore, tried to paint me as the ungrateful son. "Mr. Miller," he asked, "did your parents not provide you with a high standard of living?" "They provided a standard of living," I corrected, "for themselves. I was just an accessory they couldn't afford to maintain." "But you drove a car? You ate their food." "I paid for the car," I said, "and I paid for the food with my labor. And the trust they stole? That wasn't their money. It was my grandfather's legacy. They didn't just steal cash. They stole my time. They stole the hours I spent scrubbing floors when I should have been studying. They stole my trust in people." The jury didn't take long. Guilty. Embezzlement. Fraud. Grand larceny. The judge was harsh. Anthony got 8 years. Linda got 5. As the bailiffs led them away, my father stopped. He looked back at me in the gallery. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just looked empty. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just watched them go, like watching a storm cloud finally blow over the horizon. 5 years have passed since the verdict. If you look at the skyline of our city today on the east side, near the old industrial district, you'll see a new building. It's not a glass and steel skyscraper that screams ego. It's made of reclaimed brick, warm timber, and solar glass. It has a community garden on the roof and an open courtyard that invites people in rather than keeping them out. It's an affordable housing complex for students who have aged out of the foster care system, kids who have no safety net, no parents to co-sign loans, no one to fall back on. Above the entrance, etched into a simple stone plaque, are the words, "The Joseph Miller Foundation." Today was the grand opening. I stood at the podium, adjusting the microphone. My suit wasn't from a thrift store this time. It was tailored, navy blue, sharp. But on my wrist, I wore my grandfather's old watch, the one item I had retrieved from the garage that day. The crowd was different from my graduation. There were no rented luxury cars. There were social workers, city council members, and the first 20 residents of the building, kids with scared eyes who were just realizing they finally had a home. In the front row sat Dean Samuel, now retired, but looking as distinguished as ever. Next to him was Grayson, who had become not just my lawyer, but my mentor. And next to Grayson sat Mary Reynolds. She had driven in from Ohio. She was wearing a nice dress and smiling so hard I thought her face would break. And in the back, leaning against a pillar, was Carter. He was the manager of a logistics company now. He wasn't rich. He drove a Honda Civic. But he paid his own rent. He looked solid. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod. That was enough. Cleared my throat. "They say you can't choose your family," I began. My voice echoed in the courtyard. I used to believe that. I used to believe that family was blood, and that blood was a debt you had to pay for the rest of your life. I paused, looking at the young faces in the crowd. "I was handed an invoice for my existence," I continued. "I was told that my worth was transactional, that love was something you had to buy, and respect was something you had to rent." I gripped the podium. But I learned the hard way that they were wrong. Family isn't the people who invoice you. Family isn't the people who use you as a prop for their own vanity. Family are the people who stand up for you when you can't stand up for yourself. I looked at Dean Samuel. I looked at Grayson. I looked at Mary. I built this place because I know what it's like to have a roof over your head but feel homeless. I know what it's like to sleep in a house that feels like a bank vault where you're the liability. I want this building to be different. I want this to be a place where you don't owe anyone for your existence. The rent here is paid. The debt is canceled. The applause was thunderous. It wasn't polite. It was real. After the ceremony, I walked through the garden. The sun was setting, painting the brick in hues of orange and gold. Dean Samuel walked up to me. "You did good, Mason," he said. "Your grandfather, he would have loved this. This is better than any diploma." "Thanks, Samuel," I said. "I couldn't have done it without the truth." "The truth is a powerful foundation," he agreed. "By the way, I received a letter from the correctional facility." My stomach tightened. "Anthony?" "Yes," Samuel said. He's up for parole next year. He wants to know if you'll write a letter of support. I looked out at the city. I thought about the man who stood on the graduation stage and demanded $200,000. I thought about the man who threatened Mary. I thought about the man who drove a Porsche bought with my future. No, I said calmly. I won't. Good answer, Samuel smiled. I walked over to the edge of the roof. Below, in the parking lot, was my car. I had finally retired the Ford Ranger last year. Now I drove a Volvo. Safe, reliable, solid. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and new construction. I wasn't Mason Miller, the victim. I wasn't Mason Miller, the debt. I was Mason Miller, the architect. And for the first time in my life, the blueprint I was following was entirely my own. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my story, it is this: you do not owe your parents for your existence. We live in a world that puts family on a pedestal, often at the expense of our own mental health and financial survival. We are taught that gratitude means submission, and that love means allowing yourself to be used. But true parenting is a gift, not a loan. A parent's job is to launch you into the world, not to anchor you down with their own failures and greed. If you are in a situation where love feels like a transaction, or where your value is measured by what you can provide to those who are supposed to provide for you, walk away. It will be the hardest thing you ever do. You will feel guilty. You will feel alone. But you cannot build a life on a foundation that is crumbling beneath you. You have to pour your own concrete. You have to design your own future. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt invoiced by your family, emotionally or financially? Have you ever had to cut ties to save yourself? Or, simply, what does the word family really mean to you? Drop a comment below with your story, or just type "good" if you believe that Mason made the right choice in the end. Your interaction helps this video reach other people who might be trapped in the same darkness I was. Let them know they aren't alone. I'll be reading the comments. Thank you for listening.